Tonight, the state's road toll rises following the death of a man following a car crash in Wyala earlier this month. And police investigating a pair of break-ins in Broken Hill over the weekend.
From our 7 Spencer Golf Studios, your nightly news with John Hunt begins now.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your company this evening. First tonight, a 12-year-old Wyala boy has been charged following a car crash earlier this month, which saw a 20-year-old die in an Adelaide hospital yesterday afternoon. Our reporter Sophia Contagonis has more.
A serious crash in scrubland just outside Wyala has turned to tragedy, with a person who was injured in the incident succumbed to his injuries over the weekend. The crash occurred on Wednesday, July 8th near Jubilee Park, south of the city. Emergency services were called to the scene after a Holden Commodore lost control and rolled into scrubland. A 20-year-old man who was a passenger in the car was taken to the Wyala Hospital. He was later rushed to the Royal Adelaide Hospital with serious injuries. Sadly, the man passed away in hospital yesterday. 2 others who were in the car, aged 11 and 12, were treated in Wyala for minor injuries. The 12-year-old, who police allege was the driver, was charged on the day of the crash with 2 counts of causing harm by dangerous driving. He appeared in Wyala Youth Court the following day and was remanded in custody. Police say one of those counts is expected to be upgraded to causing death by dangerous driving. The 12-year-old boy is scheduled to next appear in the Adelaide Youth Court on the 22nd of July. The death sees the state's road toll rise to 55 compared to 65 at the same time last year.
Broken Hill Police is calling on the public for information following 2 break-and-enter incidents at the weekend, one occurring in the city south next to a local entertainment venue.
A busy weekend for local police. Officers were called here to the White House Convention Centre just after lunchtime on Saturday. They were responding to reports of multiple shipping containers in a nearby yard being broken into.
A number of shipping containers have had their locks cut off and been opened up, and there's also a shed that was entry was gained by way of removing a metal panel.
Officers not certain when the containers were accessed.
We're still trying to establish exactly when it may have occurred. There was indications on the cut locks that it could actually have been anything up to a couple of weeks since the offence actually occurred.
Police are still yet to determine what was stolen from the containers, but are urging residents with information to come forward. Investigations are also continuing in another alleged break-in, this time in the city's central area.
The residence in Cobalt Street was broken into. Entry was going through a rear door and a number of items were stolen from inside. There was also an unregistered vehicle removed from the yard of that house.
The house was under renovation, with the offender making off with 2 bed frames and a kitchen range hood. The missing car has been found, with police also looking for witnesses.
If any suspicious activity is noted, please call Crime Stoppers or call the local police station, and we'll check out anything we can find.
A Broken Hill man is assisting police with their inquiries regarding the Cobalt Street break-in. Patrick Reinke, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
A man has been arrested following a stabbing incident in Munter yesterday. Police were called to a Barclay Street property at around 11:30 a.m, following reports of 2 men fighting. On arrival, they discovered a 36-year-old man with a stab wound in his back. He was taken to the Royal Adelaide Hospital, where he received treatment. A 39-year-old man was arrested at the scene and charged with aggravated assault causing serious harm. Police say all parties are known to each other. Drivers are being encouraged to take extra care on the roads as South Australian students headed back to the classroom today. The new term has seen restrictions further eased, with a return of school assemblies and formals.
A routine walk back to school as thousands of South Australian students return for Term 3. Classrooms taking the first step to return to normal, with school assemblies, formals and camps back on the cards.
Term 3 will be almost a regular school term for most of our students and families. I'm sure they will welcome that return to normality.
Parents, caregivers and volunteers will also be allowed back on school grounds, provided strict health measures are followed. Sports will also be back in play after being scrapped at the height of the state's lockdown.
We know that through being engaged in inter-school sports, for some kids, that's the thing they look forward most to in the school week.
Drivers are also being encouraged to take particular care around schools.
The last thing we want is for a collision between a small child and your vehicle, because it's a heart-rending experience.
Police will also be out in force around school zones.
You can't rely on the kids being the total responsibility for the safety of the situation. It falls on all of us.
The new term will also see continued upgrades for 27 South Australian schools, including Port Lincoln High School's $15 million development.
We're investing in the city and the country. We're investing in new schools, including in Goulburn and Whyalla and country areas, and we're investing in upgrades to existing schools.
Nathan Regter, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
Still to come tonight, Broken Hill Police to check in on locals who've arrived home from Victoria. And the Silver City Cup, the latest event to fall victim to the coronavirus crisis. Welcome back. Barrier District Police say they'll be conducting compliance checks on Broken Hill locals who've returned from Victoria. They'll use information gathered at border checkpoints along the Murray River. New South Wales closed its border with Victoria after the state recorded a surge in coronavirus cases. Anyone from the Silver City identified as having returned from Victoria recently will be visited to ensure isolation measures are being met. Police say no breaches have been detected at this stage. A GoFundMe page has been launched to help raise vital funds for a Port Lincoln family in need after their home was destroyed by fire last week. Investigators say the blaze, which ravaged the property on Thursday, was sparked by a faulty combustion heater and caused more than $200,000 in damage. The owners weren't insured. As of this afternoon, the page has raised just short of $3,000 for the family. South Australian officials are warning this year's bushfire season could be a dangerous one. News Corp is reporting the July to September seasonal outlook is raising fears of a large fuel load in the summer. The Bureau of Meteorology is predicting an increased chance of above-average rainfall in those months. Scheduled autumn burn-offs were cancelled earlier this year due to the coronavirus crisis. The Environment Department says although they are expected to resume in the spring, wetter than usual conditions could further delay them. The reversal of the moratorium on growing genetically modified crops in South Australia is being backed by a number of local councils in our region. Tumby Bay and Streaky Bay councils on the Eyre Peninsula have agreed to allow farmers in their respective districts to plant next season. Their decision comes after a survey of local farmers earlier this month found 80% supported the lifting of the ban. The Northern Areas Council, which covers Jamestown, has also thrown its support behind local farmers. A historic Broken Hill horse race has been postponed due to coronavirus. The Silver City Cup was tipped to run in October, but with borders closed and restrictions in place, the race committee says it was left with no choice but to cancel.
A scratching the organisers didn't want to make.
We haven't made this decision lightly. We've been thinking about it, waiting off to the restrictions ease.
The 2020 edition of the Silver City Cup will not go ahead this year, becoming the latest regional event affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The race committee saying the uncertainty of coronavirus restrictions on borders and gatherings led to the decision.
Victorian borders locked down, the South Australian borders locked down. They're talking about, not saying we get horses from Queensland, but they're talking about moving the border, perhaps to stop this pandemic.
It's not the first time the Cup has faced challenges from a major outbreak, with horse flu in 2007 affecting that year's event. That race day went ahead with crowds, but camels replaced thoroughbreds on the track. However, the club says it's the patrons at risk in 2020.
It was a great day for that, but unfortunately, you've got to look at our sponsors, you've got to look at the crowds, you've got to look at the racing fraternity. they've got to be safe, and I really would like sure that they are.
Locals are disappointed but confident they'll attend the family-friendly day when it eventually returns.
Clubs New South Wales and all the clubs in town chip in to sponsor the race meeting, and it's going to be a disappointing year not to be able to do it this year, but we look forward to when they reschedule the race.
The city's other race meeting, St Pat's, was ran this year. The March event held just 2 days before coronavirus restrictions were put in place. Patrick Reinke, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
Stay with us. A vital piece of history of the West Coast, set to be preserved in Port Lincoln. And we'll review the weekend's footy action from across the region. More than 38 years and 16,000 pages of the Eyre Peninsula's rich history will be preserved, with the West Coast Recorder being digitalised. The newspaper was the first major edition to be established in the region.
It was the turn of the century when the West Coast Recorder was first established, the paper's Port Lincoln printing press running hot, reporting on local and global issues.
1904 through to 1942 is going to encompass a lot of years and a lot of events that have happened, the Great Depression, everything. It's all locked up in those newspapers.
Port Lincoln's history group tackling the mammoth task of digitising the paper's 38 years. Each edition a chronological list of events that made headlines, which until now had been unseen for more than half a century.
They recorded everything because it was the only way you could have information recorded back then.
From the first locomotive to roll on the city's newly laid railway to the Great War, the paper details every event in more than 16,000 pages. The history group working in collaboration with the State Library and Railway Museum.
May have taken 20, 30, 40 years to get off the ground. So what we're doing is we're speeding that up by actually paying for it ourselves.
With a price tag of $26,000, the project doesn't come cheap. However, organisers say you can't put a price on history. Locals also pitching in, donating their 2 cents to help the group complete the project.
From $20 up to $10,000 for one donation, which that person is the most excited about this happening, so we're very, very grateful.
For more information, visit the Port Lincoln History Group's Facebook page. Nathan Regter, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
South Australian girls with a passion for leadership are being urged to apply for the Country to Canberra program. Rural students in grades 10 to 12 could win a trip to the nation's capital, where they'll meet some of the nation's most important leaders and receive training. Those interested are encouraged to submit a 2 to 3 minute video or 600-word essay on how women and girls can empower each other during times of change.
For young rural women across Australia, extra barriers such as time, distance and funding add to the impact of gender issues.
Entries close on September 4th. Turning to local footy now, and the race to the finals is already heating up across the region. In Whyalla, West shows it remains the team to beat, with a big win over bitter rivals North. Sophia Contagonis has this week's football wrap.
Round 3 of Whyalla football saw another great game between two rival teams, with cars piling in along the fence line here at Memorial Oval. The league recording its highest attendances this year, with crowds flocking back to football. West taking advantage of the wind in the first quarter, leading by 27 points. North were within 4 goals at the main break, but after half-time, the power and depth of West took over. West piling on another 8-1, including 5 in the final quarter. Even the odd scuffle couldn't stop the West dominance, scoring 23 shots to North's partly 4. West's Miles and Elliot McNamara were standouts, with Elliot winning the Robrin McKinney medal for best on ground. Kieran Hollingworth-Hughes was strong across halfback, with Nathan Grazona also kicking 2 goals. North were well served by Nick Sanders, Cameron Dempsey and Tyson Richmond. In the other big game on Saturday, 2 of the other top 4 teams, Rapina and Central Whyalla, fought out a nail-biter at Bennett Oval. Central's coming from a whopping 41 points at 3-quarter time to get within 2 points late in the final term. Roos holding on in a thriller, on to win by just 2 points and stay undefeated after 3 rounds. While on Sunday, South Whyalla recorded its first win of the season against a disappointing Waroona Bay, who only managed 2 goals for the whole game. South led from start to finish to record a comfortable win. Turning to other leagues now, and we head up to the SGL. South Augusta secured a narrow 8-point win over the Lions. Central Augusta also on the winners board this week, defeating Port by 26 points. Down in Port Lincoln, Tasman were too strong for Wayback, winning by 25 points, while Lincoln South came from behind at three-quarter time to defeat Marble Range by just 11 points. And finally, in Northern Areas football, a 4-1 in final time helped Uluru overcome Southern Flinders, while Broughton had a big win over BMW, an 8-1 third term, setting up a comfortable 75-point win. And that's it for football from across the region. Stay with us tomorrow night for a wrap-up of the rest of sport.
Stay with us after the break. We'll check the day's finance news. And Britt will have the latest weather forecast. Hello again. Time for a look at how the Australian stock market fared today. Local shares started the new week with mixed fortunes across the board. Olympic Dam owner BHP rose more than 1%. Oz Minerals and Iron Road also finishing the day up. It wasn't all good news, with gas giant Santos and Elders ending the trading day in the red. Clean Seas finishing the day where it started. And the All Ords and the ASX 200 finished the day slightly down. Both markets fell by around 0.5%. Time now to check the region's weather, and we're looking at mostly sunny conditions over the next few days, with temperatures in the mid-teens throughout the week. With the latest forecast, here's Britt.
Thanks, John, and good evening. It's been a chilly day today, with Clare reaching a top of just 12 degrees. Adelaide not much warmer at 13. 14 was the lucky number for Whyalla, Port Lincoln, Broken Hill, Kadina, Cleve and Coffin Bay today, with a high of 15 degrees recorded at Port Augusta, Port Pirie and Woodner. Taking a look now at today's satellite images, where we can see low cloud over southern South Australia in a cold air mass with a flow. That one brought some light showers, mainly over the Yorke Peninsula and areas of Adelaide. To our north, high cloud with an upper trough. Moving on to tomorrow, and we will start with those Gulf waters. Southwesterly winds at 10 to 15 knots, turning south to southwesterly in the late afternoon and evening. Seas below 1 metre, with south to southwesterly swells up to 1.5 metres. A possible shower at Port Lincoln tomorrow, otherwise cloudy, a top of 14 degrees. Cleve also 14, but partly cloudy. Woodner cloudy with a high of 15 degrees. A fine and partly cloudy day for Whyalla, looking at a top of 15. Port Augusta partly cloudy and 17. Kadina fine and 15. Port Pirie also with a top of 15, looking fine and partly cloudy tomorrow. Light morning frost at Clare with an overnight low of 1 degree, warming up to a top of 11 with partly cloudy conditions through the day. And finally to Broken Hill, partly cloudy tomorrow with a high of 14. Let's take a quick look ahead through the week now, starting with Wednesday. Fine and partly cloudy across the region, with a little more cloud about the lower Eyre Peninsula. Port Augusta with a high of 16 degrees. The same at Woodner, Port Pirie 15, Whyalla, Port Lincoln, Broken Hill, Kadina and Adelaide all 14. Thursday's looking to be bright and sunny about the west coast, eastern Eyre Peninsula, Flinders and mid-north forecast districts, with fine and partly cloudy conditions forecast for the remainder of the region. 17 degrees the high for Port Augusta, Woodner and Whyalla, Port Pirie 16 on Thursday, Broken Hill and Port Lincoln both 15, Kadina a top of 14. And finally to Friday, with showers across the Spencer Gulf region. Broken Hill remaining dry though, a top of 20 degrees there. Port Augusta with a high of 19 degrees, Whyalla 18, Port Pirie 17, Woodner, Port Lincoln and Kadina all with tops of 16 degrees. And John, that is the Monday night weather. Back to you.
Thanks for that, Britt. And that's the local news this Monday evening. Thanks for your company. I'll have updates later and we'll be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Until then, on behalf of the team, enjoy your evening. Good night.